we're going to go to Toronto to play in the finals. I never want to go to a huge stadium just to play in the 3rd, 4th place match. It's a loser's match played by losers, and it just sucks.
We lost the finals to CLG, so I think everyone just wants to beat CLG.
It feels like TSM is like almost out to get us. I just want to get revenge on them from last split. Knocking them out in the semis would be really, really satisfying.
It's the most important match for us. If we win it, we secure Worlds.
We wanted to go for the 3-peat. No other team has done it.
Playoffs is just everything. It's getting to Worlds. It's proving that your performance throughout the season actually matters and you can actually do it when it matters.
To beat TSM, it's not about any individual lane. It's just about being the better team. That's something we showed at MSI and we showed at the playoffs, and that we're going to show again this playoffs, is that we're a better team.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to day 2 of the North American LCS Summer Split semifinals. We've got a full house today as rivals TSM and CLG meet once again for pride and prestige as they battle for a shot at the championship. Now, fans queued up earlier to show their support. TSM fans coming in loud and proud for the boys in black, but that doesn't mean there aren't a fair number of CLG fans out there as well. Players from the top side arrived in force. Honster, Svenskaren, and Bjergsen will have to work together to take down CLG. You can see those guys here getting set up on stage for today's 5-game series. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, I'm James Dash Patterson, and helping me break down today's match are my brothers in arms, Mark Zimmerman and Alberto Kremslerin-Kifo. How are we doing today?
Pretty good. I'm not sure about brothers in arms.
What? You wouldn't go to battle with me?
I don't know.
I'd go to battle.
We're not in the same division.
Thank you very much.
Division.
Yeah.
We're like, I'm actually not that highly ranked right now.
Exactly. Yeah, let's talk about that, huh? All right, well, let's take a look at the most recent bracket and see how our teams got here. Counterlogic Gaming defeated Liquid in last week's quarterfinal, and as the lowest remaining seed, moved into today's match against first place TSM. Now, on the other side of the bracket, Cloud9 knocked Team Envy out of the playoffs and then came out ahead in yesterday's 5-game series against Immortals. That means they're headed to the finals and will face off against the victors from today's match. Now let's see how the current playoff picture has influenced the championship points ladder. Cloud9 have moved up into 3rd place, guaranteed at least 90 points with a 2nd place finish, but they haven't earned quite enough to dodge the regional qualifier unless they win the summer split altogether. Now the winner, of course, auto-qualifies for Worlds, and the 2nd seed will go to the team with the highest points, either TSM or CLG remaining after that. Now the remaining playoff teams will face off in the regional qualifier, and the winner of that tournament earns our 3rd and final spot to Worlds. Now, as a reminder, all of our semifinalists will be headed to Toronto to compete at the Air Canada Centre next weekend. A limited number of tickets are still available, so head over to lollysports.com/tickets to reserve now and see the best teams in North America battle live for the title of North American champion and a trip to Worlds. Lots on the line there for all of our teams. And of course, now before we jump into today's matchup, we've got to talk about yesterday's insane 5-game series between Cloud9 and Immortals, where Cloud9 unseated our 2nd place Immortals for a 2nd split here. Immortals are not going to the finals.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about it. After 2 really dominant regular season performances, they seem to just kind of fall apart and they don't look reminiscent. There was no Huhi Reignover pain train throughout this series. Huhi had some good games, of course, but he also had someone that looked really bad, and Reignover was mostly a non-factor. It's very surprising.
Right, and even in the games where Reignover made attempts for Huhi to get ahead, Impact dealt with it very well.
Yeah, on the other side of the coin, Cloud9 played excellently as a team and had such outstanding performances from individuals like Smoothie and Impact, just being so solid for their team, and kind of the uncredited heroes for the game, not so much Impact, but Smoothie in particular, just being so solid, enabling the bot lane to survive and being able to read so many of the plays that Immortals was trying to do. And I really look forward to them playing into the finals, because I think that the game that we saw between them and Cloud9, or Immortals, is really kind of the peak that we're seeing of North America right now. You know, these teams have been scrimming against TSM and CLG. They will have a lot of information as to how these teams are going to play today, and it's probably going to be real close.
Yeah, Meteos, one of our, or rather our first MVP of a season there, back on stage qualifying for finals once again on C9, so that's got to feel good for him. But we have to talk about impact very specifically. We mentioned him a little bit already in the way that he dealt with both Huhi and Reignover, but this guy put up a massive performance yesterday to take his team to the finals.
I think it's the kind of thing you have to worry about moving forward, because it was in the Envy series as well that he's just been pulling a ton of pressure, both in terms of the draft, where people are counterpicking him despite the fact he's always taking his champion first, basically, and there's no impact from it, in a sense. He's always coming out fine through the laning phase. He's always had an extremely strong laning phase. It's what he's kind of known for, even in Season 3 form, and you see how important it is now that he has to match up 1v1 versus someone every game.
Right, exactly. And beyond that, the fact that he won on 3 different champions yesterday, so we're seeing the Gangplanks, that late game scaling, survivability in lane, just trying to get to that point, but we've also seen Gnar and him bully people out, so really playing all of the styles.
And the biggest thing is that he can't be exploited. We've seen if Huhi and Reignover weren't able to crack Impact, don't really think there's anybody in NA that can actually put that for him, and that's just such a relief for Cloud9 when you know that the top side of the map is always on lockdown. You know you have somebody that you can count on that can influence the team fights properly, that will be there to answer teleports, whatever's going to happen, that just kind of limits the options for whoever's playing against him in the finals.
Now, I want to approach another discussion, and we don't have to have the answer to this just yet, but as we've seen a little bit of evidence across all regions, and then in particular NA, I want to get your guys' assessment of how NA teams are dealing with the first turret gold change, right? Do you think that maybe one team has figured it out better than the rest? What's your assessment of how teams are playing around that objective right now?
The only team that seems to have like a really concerted effort around it that we've seen so far, I think, was CLG. We've seen other teams, you know, be conscious of making sure that that first turret blood gold goes on the right people, C9 being one of them. When they were dropping their first turret, they try and get it onto Sneaky. That huge 650 gold spike is massive, but the only team that was really like, we need a turret, let's go get it, seemed to be CLG. But there's a bit of a question mark about how important it is, because if you're doing it in a turret trade, it's really only 300 gold bonus, which isn't a ton.
Right.
So it's not like a big deal.
You know, Crumbs, I think looking at it in that sense, right, globally, it's not that much of a gold swing. The more significant thing is when teams do manage to get that 650 spike onto an individual person, it can really make the difference in an item breakpoint at those early stages in the game that might swing team fights around, say, the Dragon or the Rift Herald.
Exactly. I think that they're putting maybe a little too much emphasis in getting the turret as a team. So you see a lot of, hey, this is the lane's going fine, let's just try to accelerate the tempo and try to trade a turret in the top side, 4-man that wave, and it usually results in a little bit of a net goal, but overall it doesn't seem to impact the entire flow of the game, the actual outcome, because you're leaving somebody on the bottom side to take all that farm by themselves. So ultimately the other team is benefiting from individual gold being channeled onto their important carries. But I think the biggest influence is when you have somebody that's winning lane really hard, and then the jungler can just show up, have a little bit of a nice roam, have a deny, and then you push that turret down rather quickly, and that's when you have a massive influence on that first turret.
I think a big thing to look at too is just Rift Herald. It seems to have been almost dropped off the radar completely for teams in terms of its importance. I think you could argue that that buff is more important than 300 gold or something, and that if you're willing to like move topside, why not just grab Rift Herald or something potentially? I think moving forward, there should be a better balance between them, because there does seem to be an overemphasis on Dragon and turrets right now.
We're still in those very early stages of adaptation and evolution here in this meta. We'll see how things develop throughout the remainder of the playoffs. Now, though, it's time to shift our focus to the main event where longtime rivals TSM face off against CounterLogic Gaming. Now, these teams have been competitors since before the LCS was even founded, and you can't tell a story of one team without mentioning the other. Now, their journey together continues today and has become even more dramatic in Season 6. We've got Doublelift, who moved over to TSM after having, gotten the win in Summer Finals with CLG last year. Now on the side of TSM, suffering the loss against his former team in the finals of Spring Split, looking to strike back here in the semis.
I think it's hard to even call the mistake what CLG did in letting him go and trying to move forward with a different roster. It seems to have worked out pretty well for both TSM and CLG. TSM making the finals, ultimately losing to CLG, winning 2 in a row. So you can't really say like, oh, how could either of these teams have done that? And I think it's just a new chapter for Doublelift ultimately, and trying to reestablish himself as the best player. I think he's done that pretty well in the AD carry position, just having a monster performance this season, and really gonna have to prove it against his former team.
I mean, I'm a huge fan of the CLG approach towards we're gonna focus mostly on teamwork, on the synergy, making sure that our players can understand each other and work off that, because when you look at the roster, you don't think we're the superstar players here. You don't really rank them up as the best players in each of their roles,
right?
Maybe with the exception of Aframu. And even then, they still continue to make playoffs. They still continue to surprise. And even today, when you look at them going into TSM 17-1, you still can think CLG could actually take this if you know, they always manage to show up the X factor.
I think what's really interesting with that approach too is just the fact that at certain points throughout the season, they may not look the best, but the fact they get along so well lets them improve to really peak at the end of the season, which it seems like we're seeing.
Well, CounterLogic Gaming have bested TSM in their most recent playoff clashes, but in the regular season, CLG, well, they haven't won a single game against TSM, who have their eyes on their prize after the most successful split that they've ever had.
Yeah, and TSM is a team that just goes off everywhere. They seem to have arguably some of the strongest players in every single position. And moving into standard lanes, it doesn't seem like that would hurt them. They played a ton of standard lane games throughout the regular season. I think they were #1 in terms of like the amount of games they got, and they just crush. Like Bjergsen and Doublelift have some of the best numbers in laning phase. Hanser is no slouch himself. Sven moves around the map extremely well, and Biofrost got the name Bio God for a reason, you know.
So I actually think that this matchup is going to come down so much to how the teams handle the invades together, because we saw in CLG's matchup against Team Liquid that they were doing multiple invades, not just with the jungler, but they'd have laners come in, push into the jungle. You know they're contesting pretty much every buff when they can. Same thing with TSM's approach throughout the entire split. They've been vocal themselves. They want to do jungling as a team objective. You have Sven Skaren when he takes over and all the lanes are winning, immediately, every single buff, they're there. The timers are there. They say, oh, this is great. We want to fight for everything. Why wouldn't we if we were ahead? And just a matter of which team can kind of capitalize on all these jungle fights.
Now, historically, as you saw there, TSM has the edge in the head-to-head matchup against CLG. That, of course, is only specific to LCS era, so any games they played prior to the instatement of the LCS are not applicable. But TSM have definitely proved themselves to be at the top of the league. CounterLogic Gaming, though, have been on the rise and have had their best games so far against Liquid in the quarterfinals. They looked very solid on this patch, as you mentioned, Mark. Now, where can we look to see CLG come away with advantages? Because we just spoke about how across the board we look at TSM, we go, well, I pretty much win in each position, right, individually. So CLG, how do they come out ahead in this best of 5?
Well, I think CLG is kind of known for being the underdog in a sense. Like, you look at a lot of their matchups that they played even at MSI, and you're like, oh, they're kind of outskilled in these areas, and then they win anyways. They have this ethereal kind of teamwork that you can't identify in any one spot, but they just seem to get along so well and have that synergy that, you know, next thing you know, they're making these massive upsets.
Right, of course, they also implemented the lane swap 2.0 almost in that 5-minute, as soon as the turret defenses go down, we saw them swapping top multiple times in that quarterfinal series, showing somewhat of a mastery, at least compared to the other teams, over this new turret change.
See, I don't think TSM's going to fall for that. They saw the trick, and that's something that you see immediately, and you recognize it, and then when you go in game, you think, all right, where's the dual lane? Keep your tabs on the dual lane. Every time they're missing, watch out for the top side. Make sure that you can defend. You can counter with a roam yourself, and Biofrost no slouch to roams, and as long as the support is actually able to defend any of these pushes, and maybe you leave Doublelift on the bottom side, it'll be easy for them to respond.
When we talk about CLG needing to win through team play, a lot of that is going to be off the back of shot calling, and on the topic of shot calling, you've got Biofrost, Afromu head-to-head in the bot lane. That is going to be the focus of our alt broadcast and our featured matchup. We've got the rookie support up against the mainstay Afromu of CLG, been a leader of that team for years now.
Yeah, and what's interesting is you look at their champ pool, very similar. Karma, Bard being played by both of them, then they have some kind of tank, and Alistar and a Braum. I think that's really interesting that they both have such high-impact champions that make really flashy plays, and I think Bard will be a key champion to look out for over the course of this series.
It's also very much the juxtaposition of old guard to new guard, right? You've got the young hotness in Biofrost, who's come in and performed phenomenally in that duo lane with Doublelift. My question to you, Crumbs, is now bring the ADCs into the conversation with these two guys, and how do those duos match up to each other?
Well, you know, in laning phase, I think you got to give it to TSM's dual lane. Biofrost has been playing very well, but more importantly, Doublelift's ability to step up this split and take a role as a shot caller is incredibly impressive, because when you're playing the shot calling role from an AD carry position, not only do you have so much to focus on the micro level, but if all the plays revolve around what you want to do, around your strength, it becomes much easier for you to shine and output DPS, which has been such an important factor throughout this entire split.
Now, to keep a close eye on that matchup and the battle in the bot lane, be sure to check out our support-focused alternative stream over on NALCS2. Afromu and Biofrost were hotly contested in the all-NALCS team votes, so join resident bot lane expert Freak alongside special guest X Special, as well as Liquid Matt, to see what they make of today's matchup. Now, the mid lane will also be a fan focus, with All-Star Bjergsen looking to justify his team's namesake, while Huhi is going to come under a lot of has come under fire rather for unpredictable unpredictable performances in the past, but CLG aren't the kind of team to leave a man out there to dry. We just spoke about their teamwork and how they build each other up and definitely, you know, put resources behind someone that they believe in. Will they be able to support their mid laner enough in this matchup to stack up against the likes of Bjergsen?
Well, what I find really interesting about Bjergsen is he just controls the waves so well, in the sense that, like, he'll call people to him when he wants to dive, and if he doesn't think a dive's possible there, he'll use his wave to go somewhere else. You know, like he'll go bottom, he'll meet up with Sven, and they'll go somewhere else altogether.
And Huhi has been taking such an approach with picks like Aurelion Sol that we know how much they love, and it just works so well in the meta where roaming is so important that he seems to be the only guy that is actually able to play this character so effectively that I think that it might surprise TSM.
Very much so. And of course, while we're on the topic of it, CLG, the team also has some word about the development and support that they're throwing to their man in the mid lane.
Outside of the game, Huhi is the most caring person. He will always ask you, hey, you want some food? Oh, you want some coffee? I'll buy this for you. Like, he's the first person to go pay for this, pay for that. He always wants everybody to be together no matter what. I think that's a good type of personality to have on a team. And he definitely keeps everybody up, especially if they're down. So usually Jay is the first person to make everybody laugh.
I try to sacrifice what I have for my teammates. Whenever we lose, usually I try to make plays instead of trying to like farm up and then carry the game like myself. And that end up lose the lane or like it looks really bad.
The important thing that Smithy and I learned is to tell Jay no when he wants to go help out his teammate. You know, oh, I can do this right now, I'll help you out a lot, yeah, and sacrifice his lane. Smithy and I are just like the ones that stop the bleeding right there. We're like, do not go for that roam, Jay. Just come in, let's get some vision here. So as long as we're putting his focus in a different place, then he's more selfish, but he doesn't know it, so.
He's one of the most hardworking people I ever met. If he knows that he's something wrong with his play, he tries hard to fix it. And if he doesn't, he usually seeks help from other people.
Starting from like some point of the season, I was pretty like unconfident on myself because of like all the criticism that I got, and then I just thought I wasn't playing that well. There's always like a bad comments about me. I'll say there's more like bad comments, but whenever I read it, yeah, at that moment it makes me sad because like I don't want people to know me as like a bad mid laner.
He tries to brush it off jokingly, of course, and act like he's cheerful and happy and stuff like that. But I think during this split, definitely hit him a lot more since we were having a rough start, and especially since it's like his second split coming into LCS.
We had like one team meeting and all the teammates told me it's just on your head, like we actually never think that way and you're really good and etc. And they cheer me up, helped me a lot, and then I got a lot of confidence from it.
All he really needed was that he has the full trust of his teammates. We know that we trust him, but he doesn't know, so it's important to tell him.
Now I guess I'm playing like I used to be, not really caring about like if I'm going to look bad or good. I'm just trying to win the game.
They committed the teleport for that play to it. Huhi! It's in house, Senpai! Actually get Phoenix up under the turn. The Ignite say Huhi flashes forward and gets it. Such a confident play there. Huhi, everyone's been giving him flack for the entire year almost, even in Spring Split, and he really has showed up here.
The thing is, it doesn't really matter what they think because I'm better than that, and I know that, and my teammates know that, and that's the only thing I care.